Police say this mom was arrested after her 13-year-old son showed up at school in a mask and tactical gear after he allegedly showed an obsession with mass shootings. And that's not even the most shocking part. Police say she bought all of that gear for him.
Things that were found inside the mother's house, that child's house, which also kind of was an indication to us that we needed to move very quickly.
Police say those things found in the home included magazines, an improvised explosive device, and swastikas. And just wait until you see what this mom posted on social media. Twisted, disturbing quotes and pictures with captions about pain and death. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. This story may make you angrier as it goes on, based on the information that we're getting from police in San Antonio, Texas, about a couple of recent arrests. Those arrests were of a mother and son. This is the mom, 33-year-old Ashley Pardo. Her son is 13 years old, so police are not releasing information on him right now, but he is still in custody. The mom posted bail, which you also might find shocking based on what I'm about to tell you. Police made the arrests on May 12th after Pardo's son showed up to his school, Rhodes Middle School in San Antonio, wearing a mask and tactical gear. He quickly left the school, so police don't know if he had a gun on him at the time. They were able to arrest him a short time later. Now, this was not the only time that police were concerned about this 13-year-old student, because they say over the course of months, he showed some very disturbing behavior, including an obsession with mass shootings.
So in October, we had a class for CPS that kind of broke down behavior that would be indicative of something that would lead to violence. So they were involved with this family. They noticed things of that nature when dealing with the family, and they reported it to us. So in January, the juvenile was found in school drawing violent pictures. And then in April, he was found researching the mass shooting from Australia on the school computer.
Right there, the San Antonio chief is talking about mass shootings that happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. That was in 2019. It was an attack that left 51 people dead. You might remember it. A white supremacist attacked multiple mosques, and this is the attack that the San Antonio police chief says the boy in this case was obsessed with. He was suspended for this, and now we turn to this month when the chief says the same 13-year-old boy started scaring people once again.
On May 11, a family member saw the juvenile with a live bullet. He claimed his mother bought him the bullet and tactical gear. The next day, the family member found loaded magazines and an improvised explosive device and immediately contacted police. The student arrived at Rhodes Middle School wearing a mask, tactical gear, but left shortly thereafter.
So you have this case where a 13-year-old has shown signs, according to police, of being obsessed with mass shootings. And then the mom, 33-year-old Ashley Pardo, allegedly goes out, buys him a live bullet, buys him tactical gear, and then on top of that, you have the weapons that police say they found in the home. Police say that Pardo and her son were arrested shortly after he left school, and they served a warrant at their house, and that's where they found images like swastikas in the home. It's unclear, police say, if the boy had any kind of actual contact with white supremacy groups.
Ashley Pardo had been contacted previously by police, the school, and CPS. She appeared to be dismissive and unconcerned with her son's behavior. Her behavior is not only dangerous, it's abhorrent, especially as a parent. Ashley Pardo has been released on bond. The juvenile remains in custody at the Bexar County Juvenile Detention Facility.
Right now, Ashley Pardo is free from custody. Court records show that her bond was put at $75,000 and she was able to post that. She's now charged with aiding in commission of terrorism. Her juvenile son, just 13 years old, is facing a terrorism charge as well, according to police, and authorities say they are the first to face these terrorism charges in the history of Bexar County, Texas, because it's a new law on the books. At this point in the story, you might be wondering, who in their right mind would allegedly enable their son's obsession with mass shootings by going out and buying tactical gear, going out and buying ammunition for their kid? Well, we found Ashley Pardo's Instagram profile. The handle is the most miserable girl. Picture after picture on her profile, it is public, shows her flipping off the camera and talking about death and showing off her tattoos like this one across her stomach that reads pain. But what we found very disturbing were some of the quotes that she had archived in her story. This is one from a book that reads, quote, "Most only think good of you if you die. After you're dead, everyone will cry and say how good you were." And then you have this quote, which says, "Waiting for this world to end. Humans are only destructive. It's sickening. That includes myself. We're not productive. We are a disease." Hey, before we get back to this story, I want to talk about something that's really important, and that is getting quality sleep. Here at Law&Crime, we work some long days. They're busy days. I'm also a dad, so when the workday is done, it's not really time to kick back and relax because the kids come home and I'm doing something up until it's time to go to bed at night. So when I do get time to rest, it is important I get the best quality rest that I possibly can. I was having some trouble falling asleep. I don't know if you're like me, your mind's racing, where you're tired, but you're not exactly going to sleep. But one of my colleagues here at Law&Crime recommended that I try Dream by Beam, and it's really been a game changer for me. It really helps me fall asleep quickly, but it's not something where I wake up in the morning and I feel groggy and then I'm off to a bad start the next day. So I've been drinking Dream regularly before bed. I fall asleep quicker and I wake up feeling more refreshed. So I have more energy on air and at home. I used to toss and turn a lot. Again, my mind would just be racing and I couldn't actually fall asleep, but now that has been such a game changer for me since I've been drinking Dream. I do it just about a half hour before I go to sleep. It is super easy to make. You just simply mix it in with water or milk, then you sip on it and go to sleep. I'm not the only one who has benefited from Dream. It has helped 7.5 million people get a better night's sleep. The ingredients are clinically shown to improve sleep, and it's vegan, gluten-free, and only 15 calories. Plus, it tastes like hot chocolate, so you can't beat that. So if you're struggling to sleep like I was, give Dream a try. Use promo code CHRIS35 for a special discount. You can find a link in the description. You can also scan this QR code on your screen. Now, Pardo appears to have worked as a bartender. There's a cocktail lounge that she's linked to on her Instagram that has taken a lot of heat in recent days for employing her since this story broke. In fact, we found a statement on that cocktail lounge's social media that reads, quote, "It's very hard to post and respond when whatever we say gets taken out of context. The only way to address this is to speak freely." We found out about the situation with Ashley and her charges the same way y'all did and removed her from the team immediately. Her choices in her personal life do not represent Cream. That's the name of the lounge. She worked 2 shifts a week and left fast. What she did on her own time outside of work, we had no control over. She is no longer working for Cream, and as for her bond, we did not post it. I'm sure that's public record. We understand people are upset and want to bash Cream. Just keep in mind, we were only one of her employers. We take this matter seriously. We love our patrons and promise a safe space, end quote. In the beginning of that, you hear them say that something they had said was taken out of context. Commenters were criticizing the lounge for a Facebook post or a social media post of some kind that's apparently no longer active, so we weren't able to see it. But you can see that cocktail lounge was taking a lot of criticism for employing someone who's accused of a crime like Ashley Pardo is. The police chief in San Antonio said this was the first time that someone in San Antonio had been charged with terrorism, and that has to do with the new law that aims to stop violence in the planning phase. Now, there are certainly questions about why Pardo was able to get out on bond, but also why her son was able to go back to the middle school after allegedly searching the Christchurch shooting on a school computer months earlier. Here's what the school district police chief said during that news conference about concerns that the student was able to come back.
I can simply say this, and again, because this is an active investigation, we're very cautious on what we are releasing. However, because of the fact that he was researching this material on a district device, on school district policy, campus, he did serve his time in an alternative center. Once he's done with that, he, by every legal right, he shall be returned to his home campus, and that's exactly what took place.
This is the statement that the principal of the middle school said in something that was posted on Facebook. Quote, "I want to inform you of an incident that involved a student. Our police department investigated a concern with some posts the student made online. The student was detained off campus and is being charged with terrorism. Please know, we take all potential threats seriously and act immediately to protect everyone in our care. We will always remain vigilant and ensure our learning and working environment is safe and secure. Student safety is a top priority of SAISD schools, and we want to keep families informed of situations as soon as we are able. We thank you for your support and understanding." End quote. Joining us now to break this one down is retired NYPD detective and host of the Gold Shield podcast, Tom Smith. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. I couldn't believe this story when I was reading it. It just blew my mind. Have you ever seen, and I know you've worked cases where there are threats of mass shootings, but to have the mom seemingly, according to police, almost enabling her son to have everything that he would need to carry one out. Have you ever seen something like this?
Not to this extent, not to this point of going and buying equipment, to be used in a mass shooting. Not that. This is something at a totally different level and a part of just evil that is in people. This kid didn't wake up one day and just decide to look all this up. This was told to him. This was passed on from mom about what mass shootings are, who to look up, and who to research and who to maybe follow in life. I mean, it's so sad. You wonder if this kid had any control whatsoever in the upbringing that he had with this mom, pulling the strings about what may have happened or was going to happen.
I feel like one of the great challenges that law enforcement has is just how do you stop these mass shootings, because we've seen them so often. But when you have a case where the mom is seemingly enabling, according to what police are saying, her son, and CPS was involved, but she was, didn't really seem like she particularly cared, according to what the police chief in San Antonio said. Like, how do you stop this from happening? Had he actually carried something out?
Well, thankfully, the school was on top of it with seeing some of the drawings and seeing some of the conversations he was having and passing that along to law enforcement. That's where it starts. And the realization that this is going on is how you stop this. When teachers and administrators see the signs of what's called leaking that is going on with preparing or getting in a preparation stage or planning stage of these mass shootings, and being able to stop it and bring it to the attention of law enforcement is where all this starts. And hats off to them for getting the ball rolling and preventing something really tragic from happening.
Because it's one of these cases too, where apparently last year he was looking up the Christchurch, New Zealand attacks, which were just horrific, and then he gets suspended, and then he comes back to school. And you sit there, if you're a parent of one of the other kids, you're like, I don't want this kid coming back to my kid's school. But like, how do you balance it out and try to figure out how to protect the rest of the population while you also have this kid who has a mom that's apparently giving him everything he would need to turn something that appears to be a fantasy into a reality?
Right. Well, it's kind of a two-part thing. The school policy is the problem. There's only a certain amount of time you can suspend a student, depending on what they're being suspended for. In-house suspension, out-house, all that. So that I get, with the amount of time and then letting him back into school. But what it does is it gives law enforcement a heads up to start monitoring him and start going up on any social media platforms that he's currently on, start a surveillance on him, which would lead to watching the mother as well. But that's where it all starts. And that's where it has to begin, with just awareness that this is a problem in this country with young people idolizing these mass shooters, Columbine, Florida, Christchurch in New Zealand, all that. It's all part of this just distortion of what's going on with the youth today with these mass shootings and wanting to be a celebrity.
Well, and the other part too is, I mean, she's 33 years old, so I guess that would be a millennial, right? And so you have that generation that grew up. I mean, I'm part of that generation where kind of we became aware, like we had to become aware of mass shootings because of Columbine was the first one that I can remember. And it's like you have this, it seems, generation that also there's like this minority of it that worships these mass shooters. And it's like now they're old enough to start having kids. I mean, is that something that law enforcement thinks about, that's kind of just the next era of all of this that could be happening?
Yeah, well, you hope that's not it because that's way too many people to try to monitor and keep, under control. But what's going to be very interesting with this case is going into mom's social media and her background. You already have the kid, in what his mindset was, but now you need to do a deep dive into the mother, her social media posts, her upbringing, where was she during certain events, all that. And luckily, they did lock her up, for, the commission of terrorism and planning it. But it's going to be very interesting to see what else is in her background and where did all this start.
Well, and she was able to make bond too, and that was kind of surprising because it's this terrorism charge, which you hear someone charged with terrorism. I mean, that's pretty serious. And it was a $75,000 bond, and she was able to make it. And I know we've talked about bond before in other cases, but it seems like, just if I was a member, I am a member of the public, that this is someone who had been in touch with authorities. Like the point of bond is to protect the public and make sure they show up to their court dates. It feels low, $75,000 for everything police have said.
Oh, absolutely. The police did their job, the district attorneys did their job, and the judge failed. You have to compare what they're being charged with and the severity of the crime that she's being charged with and what was going to happen to what a bail or a bond is. And this doesn't match up whatsoever. $75,000 went, like you said, the terrorism charge, and $75,000 is way too low. They have to start equaling each other so you keep these people in jail longer.
As far as what she's accused of buying her son, and I'm trying to think of like what the defense attorney is going to say. And it was tactical gear, and we don't specifically know what those items were, but some sort of clothing that you would think a mass shooter would wear if they showed up at a school. And then also ammunition. There were magazines at the home, and then there was an instance where he had a bullet with him, and then the mom had apparently, according to a family member, bought that. I could see a defense attorney saying, what's the crime here? He likes wearing, it's Texas, you're going out hunting. This is what a 13-year-old would wear in the backyard. At the same time, it's Texas as well, very strong Second Amendment state. So she's, the argument being made, and it wouldn't be my argument, that she's very interested in having proper gun ownership for her son. As an investigator, how do you build a case that pushes against that if that's what the defense would say in court?
Oh, pretty easy. All you need to do is you line up both people, the son and the mother, and you start comparing social media posts. What were the conversations they were having, texting each other, emailing each other, whatever it might be? You start doing interviews in and around them, other family members, neighbors, and you start to see if there was a conspiracy. You start to see if there was a predication or a planning to this, this event. It's going to be pretty easy to kind of match that up. And then if that is done, the whole, well, it's just closed, it's all that, might be blown apart. And hopefully it is, because if you look at it at face value, that's exactly what was going on. It was a preparation stage or a planning stage that was going on with this. But social media is always important with cases like this, because they can't hide from it. You can't delete it. You can't do away with it. It's all there already. So they're going to have to start matching up and putting together a timeline of conversations that brought up this possible mass shooting event.
When it comes, I know you've worked cases of threats against mass shootings, and I think about the parents of the other kids at the school and how aware that they were when he came back from suspension of what he was suspended for. In your experience, how much information does a school district or a school district police department have to give parents if you have a student who's a minor, but also was searching some pretty disturbing stuff online and is returning to sit next to your kid in class?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's up to each school. And that's the problem. There should be an overriding, mechanism in place to notify parents of that school district of what was going on. You don't want to give particulars about names and addresses and all that. That's fine. But they should be very well aware of a threat that was made in a school that their kids go to, and that the individual that made the initial threat is now back in school. That should be in place. These parents are owed that safety of their children when they're in school. And that is what should be done on every single case all across this country.
Sadly, it seems too that it's an open and shut case when it's after the fact. And I think of recently we've been covering the case at Florida State, and there were some disturbing things that the shooter in that case allegedly wrote prior to the attack happening. In this case, they potentially could have stopped a mass shooting from happening. How does the legal system handle, well, he was planning this and here's the evidence, and how strict the punishment could be compared to obviously after the fact, if there's lives lost where it's clear that this person is not going to be spending any more time in free society?
Yeah, they're going to be conspiracy charges and conspiracy to commit, and that's what it's going to be. Does it hold as much weight as an act going forward? No, obviously not. But it is something, and you prevented it, and you identified someone who was going to do this. And that is a big part in this. The prevention of these crimes is starting to happen, hopefully happen more before the event, because of the advent of social media and the advent of people not putting up for anything anymore. If they see something, they're telling people about it, whether it's a school administrator, whether it's calling 911 or whatever. But a heads up is starting to develop even more, in the social media confines to get ahead of these events.
I think too about some of the evidence that was in the house. Apparently there was an improvised explosive device, which there's no way that you would use that in society, but there were also some guns in the house. And when you're in a state, and I know you worked in New York, which has far stricter gun laws than Texas, but can a gun still be a gun found in the home, a strong piece of evidence that someone was planning something when at the same time they owned it legally in a state that's a pro Second Amendment state that they encourage people to have firearms?
Right. And that's the problem. And that's building a case. And that's what was important or what was stated beforehand. Just like you said, owning a gun is not a crime if you have the proper documentation and paperwork and permits. But, it's why that gun was there and what's being said about that gun and where, the other equipment is going to take place in maybe, going forward with a plan. And that's where, again, it's the whole diagram of it all, and it's the whole configuration of a plan that is going to be important in this. It's piecing things together, Chris. It's not just one thing. It's a variety of things that add up to what might have happened.
When you have cases where you believe you've stopped a mass shooting from happening at a school, how typically do parents react when they find out what their kid was potentially planning?
Oh, well, the parents, it depends on the parents. Most are shocked and didn't know what was going on and unaware of any thoughts or planning that was going on. But then there's others that we've seen in recent memory as well that parents had an idea or a heads up, or in this case, even facilitated some of the planning to it. So it goes back and forth with, how parents feel, when their sons or daughters are stopped doing this, or after the event and the perpetrator is identified as their child. It goes back and forth a lot, Chris, and that's the sad part of it.
Really is, because I think of the case in Winder, Georgia. I bring that up a lot with the Gray family and then the Crumbleys in Michigan. But in that case, they gave guns allegedly to their kids who then carried out attacks. And then you couldn't really draw a diagram that they were encouraging them to do it. In this case, though she didn't, it appears, buy him a gun, she gave him, it was almost enabling him in a way it's in some ways it feels different than those cases that we've talked about in the past, like the Grays and Winder and then the Crumbleys in Michigan.
Well, that's what I go back to the conversation. Just walking into a store and buying something is one thing, but why are you buying it? And what is the purpose of buying it? That's the compelling part of it. And that's what the prosecutors need to really drill down on. Like you just said, buying something is not a crime, but it's the why they were buying it is what's going to be important.
And in your experience, as we're all trying to figure out how to make sure that these cases don't happen and that our kids are safe at school, what have you found over the course of your career is some of the most effective ways to stop these attacks from happening? And fortunately, we're talking about a case where an attack didn't happen and they were able to stop something potentially before it got worse.
Well, the biggest thing, like I always advocate for, is have police officers go into schools and give talks, give seminars, give talks about what's going on in society with these threats. Because the one thing I've said on numerous occasions, and probably said it on your show as well, Chris, that the police can't be everywhere, but the public can be. So if you express that to other kids and other parents, that keep an eye on social media posts, and if something doesn't look right or feel right, it's probably not. And you need to bring it to the attention of someone right away. And that's how you stay ahead of these planned attacks that are going on. These kids have the most outreach that you can imagine, more than any law enforcement agency in this country, as far as having the ability to look into social media, much more than any police department can do. So you need them on your side, taking a look at these posts that are scary, that are dangerous, and possible planning acts.
And then just lastly, this 13-year-old, he was suspended because he was interested in mass shootings. Then he shows up at school in a mask and tactical gear and then disappears. We don't know if he had a gun on him at the time, according to police. But I mean, what can be the next step that the criminal justice system can take to get this, whatever it is about him, out of him, or just to make sure he doesn't go around other people to carry out something that apparently he has a fantasy about?
Well, you start with legislation and enacting crimes that are bigger punishments and more of a criminal justice legal problem, and then just go from there. You're going to have accountability and instill the fear of, if you get caught, you're going away forever. If you had any planning knowledge of this, you're going away forever. So that's where I think the determination of what's next will take place. And the more laws that are on the books to possibly prevent this or have it in someone's head, the better.
Yeah, no, this is a shocking case. I still couldn't believe it, even as I was reading through all the details of it. Tom Smith, retired NYPD detective, co-host of the Gold Shields podcast. As always, it's great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe to On the Case, as well as Law and Crime content across the board here on YouTube and Spotify. For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.